Want light that feels alive in your paintings? Here's how I break this one painting rule for luminous results. I'm a studio painter, which means that I complete my work over several days, allowing the paint to get tacky dry in between layers. I call this particular studio painting approach the Luminous Layers technique. It starts with a strong finished background layer and then builds forward with thin passages of paint and subtle shifts to create depth, form, and detail. If you've ever struggled with muddy colors or paintings that feel flat, this technique can really transform the way you work. I bumped into this by accident. I had a couple of canvases that I started painting on that I just wasn't happy with. Yep, we all have bad starts sometimes, like what was under these two pieces here. They were at an early stage and dry, so I simply sanded down any paint texture with a fine grit sandpaper and decided to paint a solid layer over the top to cover the previous work. Unlike the method where I start with a line drawing or a transparent underpainting, building thicker layers as I go, something I usually do, this approach begins with what looks like a completed backdrop, using a bold, solid, or modulated color or colors. It's like setting the stage before the actors arrive. That foundation not only anchors the composition and pulls it together, but also influences every thin layer that I'll be applying thereafter. Besides being able to recycle a bad painting, what I love about this is that the image I'm painting comes into focus very quickly. And the fun part for me starts when the foundation is in place in my painting, so I can get on with the details and decisions that bring it to life. It's like watching the narrative emerge from fog into focus, but right up front. As an example, I started this finished piece with a thick tonal layer of green. And this one, still in progress, with a scumbled landscape foundation. I gave a lot of thought to what I wanted to shine through to my finished works before starting. To show how subsequent layers give luminosity to a piece, you can see around the eye here how this portrait begins to take on a glow as thin color is applied. This technique will work for whatever subject matter you choose, still life, landscape, even abstraction. I choose the figure and portrait painting, so that's the angle I'm coming from today. As a figurative painter, I start with a reference photo. Working from my laptop, I can zoom in and out for detail. Now, I've already massaged the photo a bit by the time it gets here. I may have used Photoshop or my Microsoft Windows app. Whatever gets me the color, background, and message that I'm after. Then I improvise as the painting progresses. I'm personally not concerned about matching flesh tones in my work. As you might see in these close-ups, I'm chasing artful color that sets the mood but still looks like it belongs to a human being. What is flesh tone really? Is it pink? Is it beige? Is it brown? Well, yes, but flesh is a bit of a chameleon. It reflects all kinds of light and the surrounding color, so it may be blue, green, or yellow as well. For me, pushing those boundaries somewhat is half the fun of painting people. Now, if your goal is a more subdued flesh tone, that's great too. Even then, I suggest nudging the color a bit with this method. You can always tone things down later with more layers and your figure will resonate more effectively. What you'll need: a prime panel or canvas toned with an opaque background color, of course. Choose this color with some thought. It's going to hang with you for the whole painting. For example, my reference image here has a cool green vibe, so I mixed a custom turquoise using phthalo blue, cadmium yellow light, and white. I'll choose a limited oil palette. Less is more. More is overwhelming. And then there's my go-to brushes for this little piece. A couple of number 4 synthetic bristles, one for light colors, one for darks. This saves on brush cleaning as I work. I'm also going to use a couple tiny detail brushes for highlights and control when it's needed. And then a big soft round brush like the number 10 here for blending edges a little bit. Then I'll choose a white drawing pencil and some matte workable fixative to set my preliminary drawing. So let's begin. I start with a background I've painted. Notice how it's not a flat color. This layer has modulated color and a few brush marks showing to get the dimension going. Don't add any medium to the paint at this stage unless you plan to use it throughout. I'm talking about linseed oil, Galkid, etc. We consider these additives to be fatter than pure paint. I know it's tempting to add medium to make the paint move, but there's a fat over lean rule. Paint with medium is fat, so subsequent lean layers without it might not adhere properly. Once that layer is mostly dry, maybe 2 days or so, I sketch in the main figure. I want to keep my painting where it belongs and preserve that background for as long as possible, so I'll make a simple preliminary drawing. For this, I grab a white charcoal pencil. It shows up better on a mid-tone surface than regular graphite, which you could use for lighter backgrounds. You can do a careful line drawing here if you prefer. It's all good. But I'm keeping it loose and lively with a continuous contour line drawing, just for fun. That just means I try not to lift the pencil as I work my way around the form. I try to feel each contour. I'm not chasing a perfect likeness of the model here anyway, but this technique can be surprisingly accurate. It's definitely expressive. With my drawing in place, I'm going to take this outside and spray it in various directions with my workable fixative, and then I'm going to leave it there for about 5 minutes to dry and air out because I don't want to be inhaling this stuff indoors. I'm going to start here with just 5 colors. On the right, I've got my light colors, white, cadmium yellow. Titanium white is my coolest hue. Cadmium yellow light is on the cool side, but it doesn't really show that way here on the palette. And the cadmium orange is my warmest color. On the bottom, I'll use the dark dioxazine purple for my darkest value. In its pure form, it's almost black. Then I've got a medium dark color, permanent rose. I'll be experimenting with color mixtures to find what works. I already found that the burnt umber and ultramarine blue I often use to lay in darker value just looks muddy on this cool surface. The purple and the orange, or the purple and the yellow, make a nicer brown that's more compatible with this turquoise base. I'll be using the vibrant phthalo blue again to mix various green tones later on. You just have to play around with combinations to understand how they might look on a strong background. Be ready to substitute some of your old reliable colors. You can see I'm creating shadow to build form. As I mix the colors in this limited palette, I'm finding middle values that structure the face by using the yellow or orange mixed with the darker colors, not the white. Don't rely on white for the shadowy areas, or you'll end up with dull color. Try to save the white for the well-lit planes of the face. This is something I teach in my classes here in Tucson. That white paint, though, still wants to creep into those shadow areas for many of us at times, but do what you can to avoid that. When I get into the lighter planes of this face, this is where I look for the natural flesh tone of this model. For her, I would mix orange, rose, and white, and then beige it down with just a fleck of brown that I've already mixed on my palette. Really study your reference photo well as you work to find those transitional areas between shadow and light. Working the cadmium orange to yellow light as you go from dark to white areas will really define the contours of the face. And it's just fun to see what you can accomplish with these transitions. Edges matter. As you work toward completion, think about having some hard edges and some soft edges. Look for those opportunities in your photo. The edges around the hairline, the face, the eyes, they're not fixed at this point either. I'll continue to move and redefine them as I refine this piece. Still keeping that application thin with my blending brush. Now it may be hard to see here, but I'm mainly blending edges together where I want the transition of color to be soft. I'm not getting carried away with blending away my brush strokes altogether, which might flatten the work. What I want here is to let the history of the painting remain visible. I found that warm color, the orange and the mixtures of orange, are not going to achieve their naturally rich levels at this early stage because they're in opposition to all this cool color showing through. I'll use my smaller brush to begin to establish the features of the face. Really study your reference carefully here to see the interplay of shadow and light that define the protruding and receding structures throughout the face. For the eye, for example, the iris is generally overlapped by the upper lid, so you'll only see part of it. The upper lid will likely cast a shadow on the upper edge of the visible eye, while the lower lid will probably have a lighter, more subtle edge because it catches the light. The nose is a prominent protrusion in the face, yet the shadows along the bridge fade to a very subtle level because the nose catches so much light in this area. But the shadow under the tip, that's a prominent one. Notice that the upper lip is usually darker as it recedes, while the lower lip catches a highlight. Whether you're looking for a semblance of real life or an abstraction of life, the more you develop your observational skills, the more control you'll have in the outcome of your work. Now you can also let the green base show through to define midtone areas. This really is the secret to luminosity. Over time, these transparent layers combine optically, creating depth that you simply can't get by mixing everything on the palette. Because of this, I'll call it backwards process, thick to thin. As I add paint and blend lightly, details feel naturally integrated into the painting. They don't sit awkwardly on the surface. Instead, they seem to belong to the atmosphere that was established from the very beginning. I'm restating some of my lost highlights here and reevaluating the boundaries of the facial shape. Now I've got the first layer of the face. It's overall too cool in temperature, so I'm going to let it dry overnight to be able to add warmer hues tomorrow. Adding more color now would just muddy things up. I could go on to develop the neck and background, of course, but stay tuned. I'll make time for that tomorrow. Day 2, and you can see I'm able to bring more yellow and orange hues to warm up the face. The layers I add from here continue to be thin and added in strategic areas where needed, building without abandoning what I've done before. I've now added phthalo blue back to my palette and burnt umber, mixing them with the yellow and purple to get a variety of shades of green to quickly brush in light and dark areas of the background. I've left most of the base color showing. Here's where you can really see how much that solid base layer makes developing the background much faster. You can continue to refine detail until the piece satisfies you, or until any additions fail to improve the painting, or until you wear out. If this approach resonates with you, give it a try in your own work and let me know how it goes in the comments. I'd love to hear what background colors you choose and what stories start to emerge for you. Until then, keep painting, keep experimenting, and keep telling your stories through the canvas.